Hey, all right. So we are live. Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming in and tuning in with Talks with Alex. I am going to be talking to some city council people who happen to all be millennials, which is something that I'm very proud about. They're young legislators in their respective cities. And we're going to talk about what's happening in Congress right now and how they feel. I have had the privilege of having two Democrats and also one Republican. They represent each portion or side of the country. I mean, Councilwoman Adrien, is in Everett, Massachusetts. We have Councilman Jeff Pastor out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And then we also have Councilman Tyller Williamson out of Monterey, California. All right, so they're all going to come on. We're going to talk about what's going on. Just to kind of give some context, I wanted to kind of show you guys a video. Now, last week, the sound didn't quite come through that well, but I just wanted to kind of give you some context on like, what we're talking about. Our policing system here in this country has gone through a lot of different phases. And for me, a huge part of it was also perpetuated by a lot of the Democrats. And so like, it was kind of put on steroids actually by some Democrats. And so that's one of the things I talk about a lot, especially as we were talking about trying to get our nominee for the party to come in. So I want to kind of play this video to give you a little bit of context of what has been happening. And then after that, it's going to kind of segue into the council people who I'm excited to bring on. And we'll kind of go from there. All right. So let me kind of put here on the side in front, and I will play the video for you guys.
Under a different name. And that sort of aggressive policing was accompanied by constant calls to increase the number of police officers on the streets. And let's be clear here, Democrats were very much involved in that, from big city mayors all the way on up to this guy.
An initiative to put 100,000 more police officers on the street. More prisons, more prevention, 100,000 more police. 100,000 new police in communities of all sizes. We need to finish the job of putting 100,000 more police on our streets. Last fall, Congress supported my plan to hire, in addition to the 100,000 community police we've already funded, 50,000 more concentrated in high crime neighborhoods.
Yeah. Thanks very much for that, Congress. 100,000 police officers isn't cool. You know what's cool? Massively expanding a broken institution to score cheap political points. And if you can do that while playing the saxophone, well, that just gets even cooler. And all the while, as we were continuing to boost funding for police and give them more authority, we were simultaneously slashing spending on key social services. That meant that in many communities, the police were the only ones left to handle almost any issue that people had, which is a real problem, as this former Dallas police chief readily admits.
We're asking cops to do too much in this country. We are. We're just asking us to do too much. Every societal failure, we put it off on the cops to solve. Not enough mental health funding. Let the cop handle it. Not enough drug addiction funding. Let's give it to the cops. Here in Dallas, we got a loose dog problem. Let's have the cops chase loose dogs.
And you know what? He's absolutely right. We are asking police to do far too much. They have a massive array of complicated duties that in many cases, they just aren't equipped to handle, making them very much the Jared Kushners of local officials, without, of course, the expression, complexion, and general demeanor of a haunted baby. So while we should absolutely be angry at the police right now, let's also be angry at the series of choices that left them as essentially the only public resource in some communities.
All right. So now, kind of leading that conversation, I've always said that I don't really blame police all the way, even though the racist behaviors are coming from police. I also blame the fact that we have politicians that have failed to funnel resources in communities that have already been suffering. And we're forcing police officers to do the job that good policy making should be doing. And so after all of that, I want to bring in my guests so we can kind of guide this conversation about how I feel, because it's going to be more so about what they think and what they're doing in their respective areas. All right. So let me bring in Gerly Adrien, Councilman Gerly Adrien, Councilman Jeff Pastor, Councilman Tyler Williamson. And I wanted you to kind of introduce that. I think, Jeff, you might not, your video might not necessarily be working, and I think you're muted right now. But I guess he'll come back. All right. So I guess what we can start doing is, Councilman Williamson, you can go ahead and introduce yourself. Where are you at? When did you get elected? And I just want to say that Councilman Williamson, I was just talking to him a couple minutes ago. I met him at the Victory Fund, and he is actually the first African American to be elected to a council seat in his also the first LGBTQ one, and he's also a millennial. So that's just kind of setting it up for who we're dealing with right here. So go ahead, Councilman Williamson, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so again, my name is Tyler Williamson. I got elected to the Monterey City Council in November of 2018. So I'm just getting about a year and a half into my term. And yeah, I mean, I just appreciate you having me on. I really look forward to this dialogue. I mean, obviously this is something very deep and sensitive to a lot of folks, but I think that the most important thing as we get into it is just making sure that we're doing the best thing for our communities and not really looking at things that might make people feel like they're safe as much as it does towards actually making sure that we're making people safe and making sure that we're not kicking the can down the road and making future generations having to solve the problems. I mean, look what we're dealing with now. So anyways, I'll defer my statement until we get more into the conversation, but thank you for having me on, Alex. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on. The next councilwoman, and let me just say this too about these council people, right? I have actually watched all of them, and I think y'all already know that I've actually watched you because I've actually had personal relationships with Williamson and Adrien. But I've actually watched Jeff Pastor, and I don't think he knows that. One of my really good friends was on his campaign, and so it kind of gave me an interest in Cincinnati, especially since I love to have conversations about economic inequality, and Cincinnati specifically has high levels of economic inequality. But that's not what we're here to talk about. So it's just kind of made me zero in. And as Jeff Pastor was running for his seat, I was just like, wow, this young person's a millennial. But we're going to pivot back to Gerly. Gerly was actually here in Philadelphia with me, and we worked on a city council at large campaign together. She was the campaign manager, and I was the fundraiser for the campaign. And we built a great relationship. I learned so much from her. She went to Everett, Massachusetts, and she became a city councilwoman on her own. I am proud to say that I donated to her campaign, women. And so, so this is Councilman. Girl, how long have you been sitting in that seat? I know you're a rebel rouser over there representing. I've read the articles. I'm a huge fan. Like, what's going on? What are you doing? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you. So thank you for allowing me to have this platform. So my name is Councilwoman Gerly Adrien. My first name's Gerly. It's half my mom's name, half my dad's name. I'm Haitian American, so I always talk about being proud of that. I am the first Black woman city councilor. So just like you, Tyler, it's we're breaking barriers, and it's hard in a white majority council. Where the city is majority, in my eyes, minority. I have mostly Black Latinos, and to only be the only sitting Black elected official, it is tough because there are so many issues that I want to solve, but I love it. I've only been in the seat for about 5 months now. It's been since January. And just like Alex has said, I've been trying to really sort of not really go small steps. I'm trying to break really big walls in our city. So I love it. This has been my dream. This is everything I want to do. So I can't wait to talk about this, especially learn from you guys. So thank you.
Okay, and so I kind of talked a little bit about Jeff Pastor before. Councilman Jeff Pastor, I was actually watching a video of you, and I'll bring that up later about some of your thoughts about classism versus racism, and we will talk about that a little bit later in this conversation. But I just want to kind of introduce Jeff Pastor. He's also a millennial legislator. And so kind of tell us about yourself, how long you've been in your seat, and what city you're from.
Well, this is great. Before I do, I want to say, come on, Savannah. My Haitian American, I can read really good. But I want to say this to you. And then it's interesting, if I may ask, you all said that you worked on the at-large campaign in Philadelphia. Which candidate?
Isaiah Thomas.
Isaiah Thomas. Great. My best friend is named Nicholas O'Rourke, and he ran on.
Oh, yes. He didn't win, though. He was from the Working Families Party.
Yeah, it's probably because of you two. So you know what? We starting off this conversation all wrong because you helped defeat my good friend in his race, Nicholas O'Rourke. Absolutely.
Well, I didn't work on the campaign this cycle.
Okay. Well, I was just kidding. But no.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Very small world. So I've been on city council since November of 2017. We of course we placed our seats. We got placed in our seats January 2018. And I thank you that you said that I'm a millennial, because I'm a millennial on the opposite end of the older millennials, right? And I wasn't the first African American, but I was the youngest Black Republican ever elected to Cincinnati City Council on the first try. There was another Black Republican. He was my age, but he won, I think, on his second try. So it has been a challenge. It has been extraordinarily challenging. And I'm not for sure which one of your best friends or good friends worked on the campaign. So that's another interesting tidbit. I didn't even know. But I do appreciate you following me. And I'm excited to be here, have this wonderful discussion. It sounds like I'm outnumbered. I see 3 Democrats. So
I'll say this. I tried to make it 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, but my Republican friend out of New York could not be on. I think he had another responsibility. So let me just say this. I'm thankful that you're on here. I'm going to try not to be too harsh, because I'm just as harsh on Democrats as I am on Republicans. That always gets me in trouble. And that was probably the reason why I wasn't elected to the seat that I ran for. So it is what it is. So,
hey, Jeff, if I could just say too real quick, I think part of the problem, and hopefully this can help set the right tone, but part of the problem is that I kind of hate this idea of Republicans versus Democrats, right? I'm sure there's Democratic values that you believe in. There's some conservative values that I believe in. And so I think we need to be able to see beyond that a little bit, but I look forward to the conversation. I'm sure all 4 of us come from different perspectives, and I hope it adds to the conversation.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you, Councilman Williamson, the diplomat. So the first question I want to kind of get into, so we just saw that video, right, about policing. And so I just want to kind of hear your guys' ideas on what you kind of feel like the core issue is of what's happening in the country right now. I mean, first off, I'm excited about the fact that we are having this much consistent protest. I think that it might just be a perfect storm, because we're also going through a pandemic and we're seeing high levels of unemployment. So because people are probably getting tired of being in their homes, period, they are ready to get out there. And what a great cause to actually be outside and protest with them. I mean, I remember I was downtown Philadelphia on last Saturday at the protest, and they was out there doing the electric slide or whatever. I mean, people are happy to be around other people. We're social beings. So what do you guys think is why do you think this has been such a successful and intense movement? I feel like we've recycled I can't breathe hashtag. So why do you think this time, or do you feel like this time is different? And I guess we can start with Councilman Adrien, because I let Tyler go first the last time. Yeah.
I think for me, I was just explaining to my father today how we're starting to see policy changes. It's not just the protests, or it's just people just putting up Twitter hashtags, right? When we saw New York last night or yesterday afternoon was able to say, you know what, the chokehold is not okay. That is not right. It's wait, for so many years, I think we personally knew that was wrong, but for a group of a majority of people to say that's wrong, let's see what other people are doing. I know last night on my council, I was trying to get some things passed with my colleagues on what we could do with our local police officers. And sadly, the conversation went a different route than what I was hoping for. I thought this time would be a perfect time to bring up those topics, but my colleagues didn't agree with me, of course. But I'm hoping that at least we're opening the conversation and seeing like, okay, we've had enough talk. Let's see how we can really change these policies. So I'm starting to see that. And that is exciting to me because I am a policy lover and I just want to see changes for our communities.
Yes. I'm just curious. I mean, and first, let me say this because I always feel this. Please like, please share, please comment. If you send questions inside the comment section, I can bring them up and we can ask them to our council members. So feel free to engage while we are having this conversation. Don't feel like we're talking at you. We want to invite you to hear your opinion and also hear your questions. So what, and I'm just going to follow up this question with this, and it could be like real quick, and then I'm going to pivot to Jeff.
Yeah.
Answer, but what was the pushback that you kind of got? Like kind of like what were, and it could be small snippets, like what were some of the concerns of the policies that you were trying to promote? And you probably just give us one as an example of it.
Right. So they were trying to say, Gerly, what's happening on the national level is not happening in Everett. That doesn't pertain to us. So don't try to take what's going out there and bring it over here. Our police officers are great. And I'm thinking, well, little did you know, in the past 3 years, we've had 2 police officers kill Latinos on the streets of Everett.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, we just had a Black youth-led vigil the other day, and we had students talk about racism that they felt from the Everett police officer. So I'm thinking, like, my colleagues have no idea what's going on the streets. And for them to push back, it was just, they just kept saying, you know, what's going out there is not happening in Everett. We have great cops. Everything is okay. And I'm just like, no.
Okay, I hear you. Okay. That sounds like, yeah, I can understand that because they were saying that same thing in Atlanta. The mayor, I think, was kind of saying that same thing. Go ahead, Councilman Pastor.
You mind asking me the question again, my friend?
So what are you thinking that the core issue is with this, and what do you think is different about this time or not different about this time?
Thank you for restating the question. You know, I think that there's a long, nasty history of what you all would call economic injustice. Okay. I don't want to be too long-winded, but my colleague loves policy. I love history. I think the two are basically necessary, right? And when you look at Cincinnati in particular, you think about the 1930s when they came out, roughly 1930s when they came out with the FHA loan and the VA loans, and you think about Levitt towns much, you know, later, you know, when they were building suburbs. You think about transportation. And these are issues, by the way, that Republicans, in my opinion, were on the right side initially. You think about the interstate highways and that sort of thing. You think about the work by Kathy O'Neill called Weapons of Mass Destruction. You corral people based on class, and you you segregate people based on class, and you segregate people based on race. And then you put police there to kind of keep the people in check. You deindustrialize the inner cities or the urban core, whatever you want to call it. And you move industry out to the suburbs, and then you disallow the folks who need to live next to their homes because maybe they don't have the transportation. To me, all of this is just, as Malcolm would call, the chickens coming home to roost. That we've had a long storied history of just, targeted economic injustice for one particular class, and certainly for individuals like African Americans. And this has been allowed to go on, and without, the elected officials in some areas, and I'll put my party in there, who seems to love the FOP, who seems to love law and order more than they love freedom and liberty. They've just allowed this to go on. People swept it under the rug. They've claimed that this is the breakdown of the family. I say that it's social engineering. Again, and I say that these are chickens coming home to roost. You can't just put people in one area and just expect them to be okay. You can't disinvest in education. You can't do, for one group and then not do for the other. Just don't do for anyone. That's my economic policies. So all of that to say that what I see when I saw George Floyd is, and again, from my ideological perspective, I just see government run amok. That we've basically given up our civil liberties for this perceived safety, for this security. You know, we are not calling out our favorite unions. You know, the police union is the flavor of the day, but we don't call out the teacher union when they're doing wrong and they're destroying lives. And, you know, while they're asking us to have this no snitch policy, police officers don't snitch on themselves. And, you know, we see it over and over and over and over again. And I like what the Council Member Williamson said. You know, to me, it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a human issue that you can dehumanize, you know, folks who look like me. And that's okay. And Castile shouldn't have, you know, he shouldn't have did what he did in the split second that he did. And Tamir Rice looked like a grown man. And Eric Garner shouldn't have been selling Lucy's. And it's just, it's on and on and on and on. And to me, I think this has a lot to do with the economic slavery that we're in. And I think it was Malcolm, and I'm going to paraphrase him, to say there could be no political freedom. And it wasn't Malcolm, I think it was Milton Friedman. So there could be no political freedom until you first have economic freedom. You know, I was just sharing with a fellow Republican today. I said that the way that inner cities and urban, whatever, I'll use the term inner cities, but folks will call it urban core, whatever. The way that they're policed, we don't see that out in the suburbs. We don't see that in more affluent areas. And whether the affluent areas are, you know, mixed or black or white, you just don't see that. And so I wonder if George Floyd was of a different socioeconomic status, would he have met the same fate? You know what I mean? Even more so, I wonder if George Floyd would have, if he was white, if he would have met the same fate. So, I mean, all of those things come, for me, is just, not to repeat myself, and I see my staff kind of telling me to shut up. I'm sorry. I'm going to end it there because I don't want to capitalize on it. I don't want to capitalize the conversation. So
no worries. I think I want to get back to that whole suggestion of, if George Floyd was wealthy, would he have died? Right? That's a really good question. And I think that goes to the point of the whole wealth issue. You're saying that it may be more so of a class issue, which I've always thought. But there's a particular issue with African-American males and wealth that I think is not, that is always overlooked. And we'll get back to that after we hear Councilman Williamson. But go ahead, Councilman.
No, I mean, I think it kind of flows in perfectly with what my thoughts were anyways, because I live, so Monterey, California, Central Coast, California, so about 2 hours south of San Francisco, hour south of San Jose, 5 hours north of LA, really very center of California on the coast. The population in this town is about 28,000 people. But we have a budget of about 180 million. So, I mean, it's like we're a huge tourist industry. So we're a very wealthy community, but very small population. And then it's a lot different than Gerly's experience because, you know, I think the population of white people in this town is about 80%. And so when you talk about the minorities, you know, we're talking about really small numbers that add up to at the most 20%, right? And so I think there is about 3% African-American population. So I'm an anomaly in the town. And so it's similar to what you were saying, Gerly, in the sense of people don't think that we have those same problems here because of the different makeup of our community. But I think that those show indications of other things. And I mean, when you talk about politics, you can see how everything is connected. And so one of the things that I ran on, one of the things that I've been trying to push for is housing affordability, because it's so unaffordable for people to live here. Who does that disproportionately affect? Minorities, people of color. So anyways, that's kind of one of the things that I'm looking at. And I've been speaking to the media a lot about this issue because I've been getting a lot of pushback and resistance from folks in the community that are really big on public safety and police. And it's not that I am saying, let's completely tear everything apart, where certain communities, that might be the appropriate way to go, right? They're so deeply institutionalized in a way where there's no other way to go. And in this community, it might be a little different. We might be able to pull some things in a way that helps us be a little bit more progressive. And that's what I'm hoping for. And so to the point of my conversations with the media, I've been telling them, my mom, she served in the Navy for 20 years. So I've lived in a lot of different places my entire life. I've been around a lot of white people and people of different races. So I didn't grow up in an African-American community. So my experience growing up is very different than, I would say, a traditional African-American, where you see this type of hate every day of your life. Right. And so I see it, but it's just it's different. Right. I live in a town that's 80% white people, and I've found a way of being able to work with them. And I get hated on sometimes by the way that I try to blend into the community. But when moments like this happen, right, it pisses me off. Right. I get just as upset because my skin color is exactly the same. And so, yeah, I think that there is an element of this experience that is about an economic inequality. But at the end of the day, me being on the city council in the city of Monterey, I'm in charge of the police, right? And so I should be able to go out and know that I'm good. As a Black person, I know that I'm good because these people know that I'm one of the people that run the city. But what I'm thinking in my mind is, what if that officer actually doesn't know that I'm a council member? What if he doesn't know that? And how might that interaction be or occur? So I think that there is something very specific and unique here that we should be focusing on in this conversation, which is the Black experience, which, again, I think that the economic thing is relevant, perhaps because it disproportionately affects African Americans. But I don't think that if he was in a wealthier class, maybe he would have been in a different community, but it could happen to any of us anywhere, I think. So,
yeah, I think classism or elitism, one of the two, right? I think that it shows its head, inside of the communities more so than it does outside of the communities. For instance, I believe that a lot of African Americans tend to look down on maybe poor African Americans, specifically in the communities that they have. Like, we want to move out of the hood. We don't want to live there. I think sometimes we perpetuate stereotypes of poor African Americans because I think sometimes we forget the privileges that we actually have of being able to move out of those communities, or having had parents who were focused on certain things in our lives, or having had mentors that were able to redirect us out of a path. But what I wanted to kind of bring up and show you guys, and just give me a second to do this, is that I pulled up an article that was from the New York Times, and I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but if the article is called "An End to the Class versus Race Debate," right? And inside the article, it specifically starts talking about African American boys and girls, right? So it says, Black families trace our economic insecurity in part to a gender divide that we see but often don't discuss. We know that African American daughters tend to do well. They climb the socioeconomic ladder as high as their white peers, if not higher. It's the boys who fail. Whether born to a rich family or a poor one, in an impoverished neighborhood or a wealthy one, Black boys lag behind their white peers as adults. Black boys who grow up rich are twice as likely as their white counterparts to end up poor. And of those Black boys who start life poor, nearly half will remain so in adulthood, while more than 2 in 3 of their white peers will escape the poverty of their youth. It says Black women may surpass their white counterparts in individual income, but they lack in household income. The men who would be their husbands are missing, incarcerated, unemployed, unable to be the partners that women want or the parents that the children need. And so the failings of one generation fall upon the next, as the trajectories of Black boys are shaped by the absence of Black fathers, looking beyond the usual focus on how individual children are affected by the presence of their fathers. Mr. Chetty and his colleagues found that the presence of Black fathers in the community powerfully shapes boys' trajectories. Black fathers are a social resource. So, saying this, poverty, wealth doesn't necessarily equalize, because they're saying that as the Black child grows, or the Black male specifically grows, there are so many factors that call or may derail their success, even if they come into a space of wealth. For instance, for me, I don't come from a poor family, I experienced extreme economic depression in my mid-20s, I guess, after the collapse of the economy, but also because of the struggle that happened between me being a homosexual and my family being religious. So I was kind of left out there to kind of figure it out on my own in Washington, D.C., that is very expensive to live in, to try to figure it out. You know, of course, there were mistakes that I made along the way, but I mean, I take responsibility for some of those things myself. There were a lot of factors that contributed to the fact that I wasn't securely upper middle class coming out in my 20s and doing as well as some of my counterparts. So having said that, I mean, do you feel like if we leveled out the playing field, I know that Bernie Sanders was running, and his thing is if we raise all boats, we lift, if we lift the tide, all boats will rise, right? So, I mean, do you think that there's value to that? And is there a way for us to figure out how to give more resources specifically to African Americans or African American males or minorities, period, to kind of help this racism idea?
May I comment?
Oh, you go jump in anytime. Yeah.
So for me, I was reading this book called White Trash, A 400-Year Untold History of Class in America by Nancy Eisenberg. And then I followed that up with White Working Class by Joan C. Williams, which is a fantastic. Both are fantastic reads, but if you don't have time, I suggest Joan C. Williams' work. And then between that or before that, I had read The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, which is all of it deals with class, but Richard Rothstein deals with housing policy in America and why we have to do more to correct the historical wrongs. One thing that as I'm reading through these three works and then some other works, Kathy O'Neill's work, Weapons of Mass Destruction, is that when the government has created an issue, they try to correct the problem by creating more legislation to correct the problem before, and it only makes it worse. And so, you know, I think you said you follow me. First, let me say I openly affirm you, my dear friend, as an LGBTQ affirming Republican. I totally affirm. I hate to hear about past rejections and things like that. That is not something that, you know, I want to allow, you know, you hear from maybe your first, second, or third Republican that, you know, please be proud, please be loud. You know, we need more people like you. So with that said, I Malcolm X, which I call myself a Malcolm X Republican, was like, I don't need you to correct me. I don't need you to correct a mistake. Just leave me alone. I think some parts in there in the Nation of Islam, they ask, you know, for the government to give them their own land and just kind of let them go invest in your own places. Personally, I'm against affordable housing being concentrated in already impoverished areas. We have a huge issue here and around the country where people think, whether they're white conservatives or white liberals or black liberals or, you know, even black conservative, thinks it's okay to have 50+% of properties in one neighborhood. That's the issue we have in several neighborhoods here. De-restricted, low-income, affordable housing. And it's always this talk that we need more affordable housing. We need more affordable housing. The 1968 Act was very clear that the idea is to deconcentrate poverty, that people should be able to live where they want to live. And, you know, the government was going to help make sure that that's happened. That has not happened yet. And I don't suspect that is ever going to happen. And so when I hear about a rising tide lift all boats, and I hear about more government spending and more government programs to correct bad government policy before, it makes me cautious because historically it has never worked. A government program has never leveled the playing field. But what has leveled the playing field is when the government get out the damn way. And what I mean by that is that in very clear. I'm sorry for cussing. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on this stream. But what I mean by that is I'm one of those people. what I mean by that is that I'm really the original Republican, like a classical liberal. If you are going at one time or another to give home loans to white people and disallow home loans to blacks, Jews, Italians, Irish, and others, you feel what I'm saying? When we finally get an opportunity, you know what I mean, to make it out, and when we finally get an opportunity to purchase property, what does the government come in and do? Well, they have destructive policies. We have historic examples of Tulsa, Oklahoma, with the Black Wall Street. Black folks, the government is out the way. Black folks trying to rise. They're doing exceptionally well. They destroy that. We have bank seized in New Orleans. We have, the highways that's just intersecting our communities in Cincinnati. Almost 600 to 900 structures were just demolished in African-American neighborhoods, middle-class African-American neighborhoods. The government coming to correct all of that is the problem. Leaving us
and let me interject, because I'm gonna kind of let some of the other people, because that's a really good point that you make. But I think that when you have cities like similar to yours that have high levels of economic inequality, I think it's the government's responsibility to step in and redistribute resources that all can experience the wealth that's coming into that city. But I'll pivot to Gerly, because it seemed like she was burning inside with something.
I know, I'm just like full of emotions, because I was trying to, like Councilman Jeff, I was trying to take it in and try to understand.
Yeah, I do too.
And I was like, no, like we're in this situation because we've had people in government who has broken our people, who has broken the system for us. Like it's, I feel like we need government to come in and step in and fix that. Because for me, yeah, I know, I see your face, but I feel like when I think something I'm advocating in my city is that, we don't have people of color in leadership roles. Leadership roles in our city are one of the most highest paid jobs in the city, right? So people of color are given jobs and opportunities where they're janitors, parking enforcement. These are on the lowest totem pole. So we're already saying, okay, people of color, you're good enough for these low-level jobs, but you're not good enough for the high-paying jobs. High-paying jobs, you can get higher home mortgages. You can do a lot more for your family. You could put them in private schools. You can give them better opportunities. When I look at city contracts in the city, for years, Caucasians have been able to get better opportunities with city contracts, right? And they make sure that white people are able to have those opportunities by the way they're making policies or rules or regulations that people of color can't even enter into. So I'm thinking about, man, again, we're put back into, like, we're not able to get the same type of opportunities as white people. I think about, for example, like affordable housing. I definitely think the government needs to step in. I'm a landlord. I do have investment properties, but I do think that developers have come in and taken control of what the government can do to sort of support affordable housing. And then it has left mostly people of color in areas where they can't buy homes, they can't afford to rent, and they're left out again. So I think we do need the government to step in. Like, I'm a big supporter in saying, like, the government needs to come in, fix these issues, and make it fair for everyone.
So as liberal as I am, this is the reason why I didn't get the Democratic Socialists of Philadelphia's endorsement, was because they asked me the whole question about the public housing thing. And I've read that schools tend to do better in mixed income communities, and that stopping the rent will have, like limiting or saying that the rent has to be at this level after this person lives there for the entirety of the time that they stay in their place, only creates spaces where people, as they get rid of this, their rents and mortgages don't go up, or suppresses the communities in which they are in. Well, so I guess for some communities, because it's a middle income company, and there's a number of different income levels inside that community, because of the rents being stayed the same way they are. I could kind of see where it works, but historically, rent controlling doesn't necessarily always help in the long run. And so I always get frustrated about that from Democrats, but I'm as liberal as I really am. But rent control isn't always the best bet. Maybe for places like New York, when it already costs $1 million, or maybe even in Washington, D.C., where you have to actually be a billionaire to stay inside that city. But in Philadelphia, I think that we need to find ways to mix up these communities, because having large pockets of economic insecurity. It's not good, and it was usually in these separated black people.
May I say something?
Yeah, you can if you want.
Sorry about that. Your phone, your mic is kind of breaking up a little bit, so it could be my end. But
no, it's probably mine. And what I can do is, in a couple of seconds, if I put my headphones on, if it's still doing it, so let me know if it's breaking me.
No problem. I am afraid that a government that is not representative of America is going to come in again and be benevolent and to help. And the way to fix that is to get more African Americans, to get more women, to get more LGBTQ people, to get more Hispanics to represent us, and then the government would do well. That historically, that just hasn't been the case. I want to highlight one particular point. When the government decided that, and this is in Richard Rothstein's work, and I'm going to paraphrase it, when the government decided that they wanted to be helpful to the African American and they wanted to give us affordable housing, there were two different types of affordable housing. One type was our type, the Cabrini Greens, the Lar homes here in Cincinnati, the big, nasty ass, disgusting high rises that you saw, and we're all millennials, so we probably saw all of that nasty, just housing African Americans to these despicable looking, projects. And his work, he says in Chicago, the Caucasian folks, they had what we kind of like see today. They had yards, they had playgrounds, and it was a requirement for them to kind of be married. And I'm like, here's the government giving us affordable housing, but they're giving us this affordable housing that is just, that the conditions are just horrid, And when we say that the government needs to now come in and correct, they've always tried to correct their mistakes. LBJ in the Great Society, Clinton tried to come out. I mean, we tried to fix the crime issue, so we came out with the 1994 crime bill. And only thing that I've ever said is that if the government is going to do for one what they do, 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education, they need to do for all. Or I think the best thing is that the government should never enter into housing. The government should have never entered into college education. The government should never enter those things, because anytime that the government does, they are not good to the African American, they're not good to the minority. And so then we have to come up with programs to fix what the government tried to fix. And now we're in a student loan crisis because the government thought it good to give, young folks in inner cities student loans. And I the point that I was trying to get, and I missed.
Okay, well, let's do this. Let me do this, because I want to give Tyler a space to kind of talk. But I'm just curious, is if you really blame the government for giving out student loans, or do you blame the universities for having high tuition rates? Because tuition, since the 1980s, is the only commodity that we've seen in this country that has gone up at least by 300%. So are you sure it's the government giving out loans trying to support people to get education, or is it just the university? We'll go to Tyler real quick, and I'll toss it to him because he didn't get a chance to speak. And Pastor, you to talk like a pastor. It's like, we got to get you 3 points.
Well, I actually kind of want to touch on something that both of y'all said. And Gerly, you were taking it right out of my mouth in regards to the need for government to intervene. I think that there is a space for that. And it kind of touches what you were saying too, Jeff, in the sense of sometimes effective policy is removing some policies that are unjust and that aren't equitable, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the appropriate action that government can take sometimes. It's not just about creating regulations, but there also are some regulations that need to be created. And then something else that you said that was, I think, probably a really important element of this entire conversation. He gone left, right when I was going to make the point. He couldn't handle it.
I think he's paying attention still, because even when he comes back, he's able to tag on. So it seems like he's just having some technical difficulties.
No, the thing that he said was that appropriate representation, right? So we live in a democracy on paper, but what that means in reality is far from that, right? Because if we don't have something that is truly for and by the people, that's a true representation of the population in which we live in, then it's not a true democracy, right? And it requires people to participate in that process. But when there are barriers, whether it's by them being able to vote, whether it's by them being having to be required to work 2 jobs and take care of their kids and not be able to go to city council meetings, whatever the barriers are, we need to find a way of removing them so that we can allow people to participate in the political process, so that we can fully embrace the idea of the fact that we live in a democracy. So I think that there's a space in between here, right, that I think is really important. I think that when we need to implement things, right, the government is the best representation of all of us. So I don't want to rely on capitalism and industry to tell me what they think is best when they're doing it for the dollar at the end of the day, right? It doesn't matter. They're doing it for the dollar. And so I want to be able to allow them to do their thing, but it needs to be controlled by the thing that best represents all of us, which is the government. And now let's try to figure out how to work on that. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be continuing to figure out how to provide the appropriate programs or remove the appropriate barriers at the government level, so that we can best represent the people that we support, that we represent.
So we agree that
it seems like this is a conversation about resources, right? Because I mean, and it goes back to the conversation that I was trying to bring forward when I showed the video. The problem that I think we see in policing right now is that the United States, and I think that Jeff was also hitting on this, is that governments have allowed police to go into these communities that they have not given resources, and have sent them in there to control them. And even the police officer that was from, I think he said Dallas or Houston, was saying that the police are responsible for doing everything. They're supposed to be the mental health specialists, the social workers. They're supposed to be there to de-escalate domestic violence. They're supposed to go in there and handle the children or the grandparents that may be abused or taken advantage of. They're the ones who have to go in there and get the poor person from squatting inside the abandoned home and take them to the police station and lock them up. They're the person that has to go get the dude that's on the corner who really has a mental health issue, or that vet that is homeless in the middle of town that's probably really just has a mental health issue, and deal with them on a regular basis and lock them up. I think that we use punitive consequences for issues that are just human. And we need to find resources or reinvest those resources, defund the police department and reinvest some of those resources, not completely getting rid of the police department. But I think that there are we spend so much money, and just on city levels, on state level, and as far as federally, on military and security. We spend more money in this country than the top 5 other countries combined on our military. That's security. We do the same thing in our cities. We have militarized our police. We spend high amounts on those other things while we defund education, while we defund other social programs that are supposed to be helping these communities that aren't necessarily surviving as well as others. So I think that if we are able to invest more so in the communities, in the infrastructure of those communities, and even the incomes that are coming into those communities, and not necessarily on the policing of them, I think that we might be able to see change. So I'm going to toss it out to you guys and see what you got to say.
So we heard Mayor de Blasio come out today and say something along the lines of how it's going to be generations before we actually see a full removal of police from our society. And I think an important thing that we need to have as part of our conversations, especially as elected officials, but more broadly as a community, is how do we create that reality, right? And so in my mind, I'm kind of like I kind of see myself as an idealist, right? How the world could be and what the possibilities are. And so I'm not saying that we're necessarily going to ever reach perfection, but how do we go to that more ideal state? And how do we start creating those realities? And so if we get comfortable in saying, well, things are just the way that they are, and there's bad people in the world, and we got to have police, right? Then we're going to keep the same systems that we have. We're not going to change that. So I think that we need to start talking about how do we actively start moving policy in a direction that creates the types of communities that we want to see.
Mm-hmm. Girl, I'm gonna let you go because I feel like we're doing a whole bunch of mansplaining to you, and we're kind of taking over the space. And trying to be good at giving women space. So go ahead, Councilman.
And so Jeff, I don't want you to think like I'm ever, I love to hear your view, especially as somebody who's a Republican, because, I'm a strong Democrat. I'm a lot like Alex. And so I want to hear your view, because a lot of my colleagues on the council, I know think like most likely like you, and I'm trying to understand how to work with them to get some of my issues that I want passed. So please, I'm listening. I can't wait to hear what you think about like the defunding the police, because that's really exciting for me to hear. But like, I'm just I'm like Tyler. I'm like an idealist. I'm a Christian. I'm like, oh my gosh, everything should be fair. The government should be like this great place that's independent, not biased. But the reality is it's not like that. And so I'm a finance manager as well. And so for me, when I look at the budget, I'm a budget person. So I've always just questioned, why don't we ever put the most money into solving the problems of society? Like, why do we put money in the one area that's sort of just like a Band-Aid to the problems of society? Like when we have police go out to the community, they're not solving the problems. They're just stopping the issue for that night. And then the next day, the problems keep going and going and going. Instead of like, I look at our budget and I'm like, how come we don't have a workforce development training center in the whole city? Like, we have nothing to help people get jobs or help them with their resumes or even understand what opportunities are out there in the world. But we fund more money for police officers to make sure they have their clothes. And I'm like, what's going, like, why do we do that? Or for example, like, I know I've been advocating for just like rent relief during this crisis. And I've just been getting a big slap no. And it's just like, why not? Why don't we want to help people stay in their homes? If we don't, they're going to become homeless. Then we have a homelessness problem. Then people are in the street. Then the people are going to call the police because the people are in the street. And then it's like, why don't we try to help the problem so that they don't get worse? And then we have to call the police. I just never understood that. And I want to have this conversation because I want it to open my eyes.
So in the city of Monterey, we have this program that the police department runs called MDOT. It's the multidisciplinary outreach team. And so they created this program, and I think it's very innovative. It's very progressive in the sense of trying to work with the community on solving their problems. But I'm not, I guess I question, there might be a space for them in that. They work with regional partners. So they have people at the community hospital, social workers that have an office in the police department. But I'm not sure if the police is necessarily the right organization to run it. And so I think they do great work. I think we do have a very progressive and forward-leaning police department. I think the problem comes in with police is that as a person of color, or maybe a LGBTQ person, or a trans person, or a deaf and hearing impaired person, right? If you come from these communities that tend to be targets for police in a traditional sense, your response or reaction to police is going to be different. You're not going to be the first one to pick up 911 and ask for police to come and help you with an issue because of the experience associated with those communities. And so I think that there's a space here too. And one of the things that I've been proposing to my council is, let's do an analysis of all the 911 calls that go in that currently require a police response. And let's look at those and see, working with our community, and let's see what of those do not require a police officer, a uniformed police officer, to show up with a gun? Can we have an alternative means of having a response to these calls so that we're not having to be so dependent upon police, and we're being proactive about helping people get their issues solved so that they can go back into society and be functional members of it?
I'm gonna let you go, Councilman Pastor. It seems like, is this okay? Can y'all hear me a little bit better with this? Okay. That's great. So I got these big bulky headphones on. But yeah, go ahead, Councilman Pastor.
First, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, because I don't know what it is. I hope I'm not getting hacked or anything like that, but I'm having a whole lot of feedback. So I'm gonna answer what I thought I heard you say, and I'm gonna do my 3 points in the close. First, I don't think that any issues that we face in America are Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian. I always think that they're human issues. I think that African Americans and Africans in diaspora have been dehumanized. So I always bring it back to the human aspect, right? I recognize that there are working class people who are police officers. And there has been a huge cry here in the city of Cincinnati, huge protest that have asked us to defund the police department. Now, I'm cautioning them and I say, hey, defund some when as far as saying abolish the police department. And that's roughly 1,400 people that are going to be without jobs. Huge historical issues with policing in America, huge issues of how unions of all labor unions protect bad apples in their areas. I'm just on the side of what is right. I'm not saying that I'm going. It's funny you should mention it. I think the newscaster was just downstairs and he was asking, "Are you all planning to defund police?" And I said that, you really have to think about what do we have in place. Now, earlier I said that I was a Malcolm X Republican. I am 1,000% for the Nguzo Saba, Ujima, Ujama, and all these other things. I proudly support the idea of self-policing. Absolutely. One of those guys, as Council Member Tyler has indicated, I'm extremely limited government, because when you ask the government to come in, whether it's the police officers, whether it's the teachers, whether it's someone else, whether it's the doctor, whatever it is, it just seems like when it comes to the African American, they make things worse. They just make things worse. And so we tried this when I was in seminary. I think his name was John DeLulio from Princeton. And it was African American pastor, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to remember this, it's like 10 years ago, that every night, and I'm gonna call it the wrong city, but every night in this particular city, Black pastors was walking the street for a number of years. They didn't see one murder while they was walking the street. It was like this sense of accountability. I'm not saying that I have an innate distrust of police officers. What I'm saying is that I have an innate distrust with people who create the law that police officers have to enforce. And so we're focusing so intently on police officers when we could police ourselves. But outside of that, we're focused on who in the hell created the goddamn laws that they're enforcing. In our city, we had Sam DuBose, who was killed by Ray Tensing. The reason why Sam DuBose was pulled over was because he was missing a front license plate. He was missing a front license plate, and the guy was the UC Police Department officer, UC officer. He ended up, after 2 trials, he ended up getting off on both times. And I asked the question, who create these laws that then sends these working class white folks and working class Black folks out to police other working class individuals? And that's what pisses me off greatly. And the answer to me is, I don't want more affordable housing. I don't want you just to talk about defunded police. I don't want you to just talk about we're going to do non-aggressive things. I want to uproot the damn tree. I want to change the laws. As this brother said, Council Member Williamson, maybe to me, as a limited government guy, small L libertarian, that means rolling back a whole bunch of these damn laws. That said, like the government is too preoccupied with who I'm sleeping with who I worship, with what I'm doing, with consistent adults doing, and we're doing things that's just limiting us. And I love y'all, I really do. But it makes me shudder when I hear other African Americans say we need more government, because the government, for what they did to Tuskegee Airmen, for what they did to the education system, the healthcare system, what they did to the Japanese, what they did to the Blacks, what they did to the Irish at times, Germans, Catholics, you name it. It hasn't been good. And when they tried to correct their mistakes, Democrat or Republican or whatever, they've only exacerbated the issue. And so what does it look like for us without the government interference? Because I believe that racism only was powerful and effective in this country because of government support, right? What does it look like when the government pulls back, right? They show no favoritism to nobody. You know, that we're free to just exist as humans as we should have been when we first got to this damn country, right? That people of the same class, whether they white, they're black, they're Hispanic, humans in general, what happens if we are left alone to our own devices? And I think that I'm proud, like I said, like the young lady said, Nancy Eisenberg. I'm proud that there's so many laws that are in place to keep the African American and for the general population, working class people from moving up and from having their own shit. You feel what I'm saying? That, but particularly to the African American, that I feel kind of privileged. That left to our own, we are going to succeed. That's with any human. I don't need your government to come in and tell me again, because your government has never been good for me. So as an elected official on the city council, one of the things that we did in conservative, old, fake woke, fake liberal Cincinnati, what we did was pass marijuana decriminalization by two people. Me, the Republican, and two, another black dude who's an independent. And said, and in addition to that, the black independent says, we want a report every month, every month about the citation rates and the report rates. Because it's not government's responsibility to get the government out of the way. So my responsibility is to lessen the interaction between police and the citizens that they are sworn to serve and protect. It is not to say just do away with the police system. It's telling our young brothers and our young sisters, hey, pick up the trash in your area. It's telling them, hey, this whole breaking bottles and staying out late at night, that's not gonna do it. If you know somebody who has harmed your neighbor, absolutely report them. You feel what I'm saying? But to say that we need more government and to say that government has a correct policy, it's just, it ignores the history of government in this country, particularly to the minority.
Councilmember Jeff, if I could just jump in real quick, and all I want to say is, I think where the separation is I think you're looking at it as, how does government currently function? Well, currently government doesn't function well, so I don't want government getting involved because they ain't functioning correctly. And what I'm saying is, I think government needs to be fully in and be fully representative of the people that they represent. And so we need to work on that. I think that should be our number one priority. Like if I could walk away with a call to action, it's telling people that are listening to continue to stay engaged, tell people to stay engaged that you are connected to, because that's the only way that we're going to make the change. If we try to back away from it and not fully embrace it and take it on, we're never going to solve the problem. We need to stay engaged. We need to get people active. We need to have a true democracy.
Go ahead, Gerly. I'm sorry.
Right, and I just want to echo that. Yeah, I just want to echo like what Tyler said. Like, I think again, like we need good government. We need good people in the government. Like, I think what Jeff is saying is that we've had people who've had bad intentions, who've had bad influences in our government system for a long time, and we've had bad policies. But imagine a government where you have, you know, good policies, good people making better decisions of the community they represent. And so for me, like, I need to see people participate on the council meetings. Like if you have public comment, make a statement about any issue that you care about in your city. You know, call your state representatives, call them. They are making these decisions every day. And if you don't get involved, how do you not know how it hurts you? It hurts you. And you think about these policies that have been happening or what's going on every single day. It's little, like, just be involved and run for office. Like, I'm a big pusher for people to run because your ideas matter. And I know I think differently, Jeff thinks differently, Tyler thinks differently, but we know that we care about our communities and we want to see the best. So we need people like us, like you, to run and step up and not just have the same old people who's been there for years and years to come.
Vote, run for office, write a letter to your elected official, participate in a demonstration. There are so many ways that you can get involved. You just have to be involved. But I think the most important is making sure that you vote. I just bottom hands down.
Well, I just kind of, you know, maybe I'll say this little piece because I feel like I keep sliding in sideways shade comments. We're like, no, it's this way. And they move on to the next person. But I do want to say this. I think that it's a very interesting thing to me when I hear Republicans say get government out of people's business because government doesn't function well. Government, in fact, does function well, just functions well for the people who serve it. Because let's go back to, like, I think you gave an example of the people in their communities trash. Philadelphia has a huge trash problem. Gerly knows the neighborhood I live in. I still live in the same place, Gerly. In my neighborhood, we have a trash problem. When I first became elected as a committee person in this area, one of the first issues that I try to think of is trash. See, the funny thing is that they expect the poor people to do what the more affluent people don't have to do, right? Wherefore, in the communities that are more affluent, they have people come into those communities and clean up their trash for them. So, you know, a little Mikey or a little Pat could very well much so be throwing trash and breaking bottles, especially because if you ever party with a group of white people, they tend to be a lot more wilder and obnoxious than some other black people are. I mean, I've turned up with white people. So, like, I mean, I think that we have expectations for one group that we don't have for another because we don't want to invest in those places because they don't necessarily pay as much in taxes. So, like, I feel like it's kind of a double standard that we have for when we try to put out this whole concept of personal responsibility, because that's what I think that you were kind of hitting on. And then two, lifting the veil, right, where like everybody could just be free to do whatever the hell they want, right? Because government is in their space. No, government functions well for large companies like Amazon. Government functions well for companies like Facebook and everything like that, where they're able to put in policies that allow them to acquire other places, where banks freely give them money and stuff like that. Like they don't have to worry about going into a bank and asking for more money to invest in a certain area and worry that the bank is going to decline them because they find them to be a financial risk. So, like, I mean, I think we do need government to kind of step in sometimes to kind of balance some of the perceptions like racism or like elitism or classism or classist mentalities that a lot of these large institutions may have about groups of people or people who live in specific areas, or even when you go into the workplace where, you know, certain employers want people who come from certain schools. They won't hire somebody who goes to another certain school. So we need government to step into these spaces. I mean, even during the civil rights movement in the South, the government needed to step in to integrate the schools. The government needed to step in to integrate the restaurants. So there are times when government does need to step in and kind of help lift classes or communities that are oppressed. I mean, you can't say the whole time that government's just all bad, because at the end of the day, all three of you are government. You represent government on a daily basis. You put in place laws. So if you're saying that we just need to get government out of things, and in essence, we don't need you. We just need to be able to just live and not have any of the laws that you're trying to put in place. So having said that, I'm going to leave it up to you guys because we are at 1 hour and 7 minutes. And I told you guys that I was only going to take 1 hour of your time. So, I mean, it's up to you. If you guys want to continue to have this conversation, or if you guys want to cut it off, because I know that you might have other things to do, you're more than welcome to do that. But kind of tell me what you want. What do you guys want? And I guess that's to be it. Huh?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting. If you can't hear me, please let me know.
Yeah, you got it. It's just like a lot of feedback in the background. It's like kind of staticky. I'm not sure when you change devices if that happened. You might want to put some headphones on, but it might help out with it too.
Okay. I just wanted to add to your last point, and I'm free to stay for a couple more minutes. That
Okay.
I'm not. I hear what you're saying as it relates to integrating the schools. My point is that it was government policies for the government to correct in the first place. That for where I sit, you know, there's no need for integrating the schools if we upheld separate but equal. That was not the case. The case is that you were giving all white schools money for their education, and you were giving nothing to black schools. And the idea was that if I integrated the schools, that we will get that funding and education would be better, it would be fair, it would be all these other things. Total opposite.
But let me just ask you a question. You do acknowledge that those were bad actors, right? That were in government that imposed those types of laws. It wasn't government specifically. Like you can't make that separation, right? Like even within your party, there are bad actors in the Republican Party, right? that you would say, like, because you're saying that you're one of the Republicans that respect gay people. You feel like people should be able to do what they want to, right? But you understand that there are bad actors that kind of do bad things. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, I understand that there's bad actors, but I don't see the government and the bad actors as being separate. I think they're one. And I think that because we only make up, 13% of the population, that there's just not enough of us, 44 million of us, there's just not enough of us to say that we're going to be in every, consequential position in every city, although we can. And this idea that, all of our troubles are going to end because we're voting. We've been doing this since the 60s. You know what I mean? We've taken Martin Luther King's motto and we've just eschewed Malcolm's motto. We're just saying, no, let's do it ourselves. Let's create our own subsystem within the system. And so what I'm saying is that we corrected the government. We got the bad actors out. We integrated the schools, and then we had other issues. And we continue to have issues. And then we have issues with funding because we attach it to property taxes and all these other things. And so I hear what you all are saying. And to a degree, I get it. But how long is it going to take for us to rid ourselves of the bad actor every single year, every single decade, until we finally get to some sort of utopia? It is not. What we can do now, though, is that we can create our own systems. You feel what I'm saying? Because I'm not admitting that it's impossible. My role as a member of city council is, like the brother Council Member Tyler said, is to try to undo as many policies as possible. So we did the decriminalization of marijuana. The next thing that we're working on is to deconcentrate poverty out of working class white and working class black neighborhoods. But I'm only one person. And to say that if we elect this person to council, we're going to be able to raise taxes, and some of the people here believe that we should be raising taxes. And I'm saying, hey, y'all, raise the taxes, raise the property taxes. It's cost prohibitive, particularly to black people. And so what do they have to do? They have to go get a government loan. I'm going to end with this because I missed this point and kind of going off the place. What I meant by government getting involved is saying, you mentioned about higher education. If I know that the government is going to guarantee my loan, I am going to jack my tuition up because I know that the government is going to get a Pell Grant, and I know that government student loans are guaranteed. Same way with third-party healthcare systems. If I'm made to negotiate my healthcare, for example, for like a heart issue, and I say, look, here's the demographics in this area, you're not going to get $14,000. You're not going to get $14,000 for this heart procedure. I'm using this term because they do the same thing in India. What costs at the Cleveland Clinic, I think it's $16,000 a year, is like $841 American dollars in India. And so the government comes in and says, well, we want to have healthcare. And so now healthcare costs, which is an issue with the CPD, this is that police department, healthcare costs is out the wazoo. Housing is out the wazoo. Everything that the government gets in, the prices spike. And what the intentions are, to help poor black people, to give black people, to correct past mistakes. It's the total opposite. And historically, we have never been in a situation where government, even with the Great Society, has tried to correct this course, and it's been good for the African American and any other socioeconomic minority. I'll end with this one. The housing policy, when you had affordable housing back in the 30s, the 20s or the 30s, if you were white, it was required that you were married. The government tries to correct this in the 60s and said, well, you don't necessarily have to be married. But if you're married, you're over the threshold, so you can't get affordable housing. And so if I have two parents who are working, but then not making enough, just quite enough to take the 30% to pay for their housing. So now daddy has to go live elsewhere or has to hide and shuck and jive because the government was trying to correct its course and say, well, it doesn't require white folks have to be married, but you don't necessarily have to be married. And then they took that. Republicans took that. Like, oh, here you go. They're just having kids to have Section 8 housing. And it's like the government has tried to correct its course so many times. When I say government, I'm talking about the progeny, the people who were in that position before, and then they watch them, go in and they do the same damn thing over and over and over again. And the only thing that black people keep saying is, we just need to vote more. We just need voter access and all.
Well, it sounds like you're saying the same thing, though. It sounds like you're saying the same thing a little bit, that we probably just need to elect better politicians into office that can help fix some of the woes that are happening in these areas. Because all of these things that you're saying, I mean, like, if you want to talk about Lyndon B. Johnson and the Great Society, I mean, between the New Deal and the Great Society, I mean, we got things that drastically pulled millions of people out of poverty. We saw massive economic redistribution happening during that time. The country was doing well. Unfortunately, African Americans weren't able to completely access that because we had racists in office. So to your point, that is true. And so there was a whole bunch of redlining, and there was a whole bunch of refusing access to some of those programs. But as a whole, like when the government has invested in the country, we've seen great wealth coming back from that. I think it's when the government tries to take its hand out of regulation and stuff like that, where we've seen the economic crashes happen. When a lot of the rolling back of those Great Society and New Deal era policies come into play, you start seeing the great collapses. Like for instance, when you talk about Glass-Steagall and they combine the interests and the commercial banks into one, we saw the great collapse happen after Bill Clinton. And we saw, like, as when Reagan came into office, that he began to roll back some of the New Deal restrictions from Roosevelt. We saw the first crash. I believe it was one of the Illinois bank during the 1980s. So it's just like, you have to look at when we are talking about government taking their hand out, it allows for people to act recklessly and with other people's lives. And if you have a capitalist society that's driven by capital, people are going to choose capital over humanity. It looks like you guys wanted to say something, and I didn't even get a chance to get the approval from you if you guys want to stay on longer. And I think that we'll stay on for about another 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll move along. Because I definitely want to thank you guys for coming on. Go ahead, Tyler, or Gerly, however you want to jump in.
I mean, it's relevant to have him on. Because part of the point that I want to make is, like, obviously, so I'm also part of the LGBTQ plus community, right? And so, the intersectionality that we have to deal with and that experience, are we to say that, okay, because we're part of the queer community, that we have to move our systems away from the government, the current government, and create our own systems so that we can support ourselves, and then now because we're Black and we're queer, so how does that work? And then are we going to slowly pull things apart to not find a way of creating an experience where we move forward together? I think we have to find a way of making this experience work for all of us. And I think that there are those bad actors, but I think by trying to create our experience around those bad actors is really allowing them to win, right? Because now we're going to step out of the way so that they can control the narrative when the governments have a lot of control and power. So we're going to step away from that and allow people that probably shouldn't be in power to control that narrative? Or do we find more of the right
limit
people?
The power, brother. No, limit the power. Don't limit the power. Don't give somebody else power. Limit the power. Reduce the power. Reduce the size of government. But
then how do we address those systemic issues within society that are they're society wide, right? How do we have that discourse with each other to figure out what the best solution is for us to move forward? And my argument is that government, which is supposed to, especially a democratic government that's supposed to be for and by the people, that's the best body of people that represents us to have that discourse, to have that conversation. Wow. I mean, what would be better? What space would you use for us to have these conversations to move forward in solving these problems? Do you think that we should all just kind of go our separate ways and talk to our friends?
What do you think, Gerly? Because I think we kind of take over the conversation. We dominate everything, but go ahead, jump in, Gerly.
No, I think it's important because, like, like I said in the beginning, I'm a big believer that government should be involved. Like, I think when we look at, prescription, like, I work in healthcare, right? So I'm a big believer that government needs to step into healthcare right now. It is ridiculous. It is a money scam. People are making a lot of money and it's not fair, and people are being left out and not getting the best care. And I think government needs to step in and regulate that. It's like when we talk about the universities, you know, I have about $75,000 in student loan debt. And I believe that if the government stepped in and regulated the universities and said, you know what, everybody should be able to go to college. You should not be making so much money off of this. Then we wouldn't have so many people be in that debt problem. So I do think government does have an important role, especially when it comes to housing, healthcare, education, jobs, right?
Food, water.
Right, everything, every single thing. So I'm just like Councilman Jeff, I just don't know how you don't see government plays in. Like, you are in government. You are a critical role in this, right? When we were talking about criminalizing marijuana, I'm like, you played a role in this. Like, you were a good person. You had a good idea. You made sure a good policy went through. We need good people like that to be involved. That's it. That's all we need.
Can I clarify? So I did admit that you need government to remove bad things from things. I would say decriminalization was actually a push, you know, not a top-down push, but just like an organic kind of push. And, you know, to your point, I will acquiesce and say, yeah, somebody's going to go in there and cast that vote for decriminalization. Somebody's going to draft the language for decriminalization. Yes, government is effective in that sense. I want to kind of address the things that I feel like would bring the cost of living down in America, particularly when it comes to healthcare, prescription, when it comes to education, when it comes to housing. And that's a true free market, free enterprise, capitalist system. And the problem in this country is that the only example of capitalism is this weird shit that has happened in America since the founding, which is cronyism, which is a perverted form of capitalism. It is not capitalism at all. And when you say the cost of healthcare, what I look at, or the cost of prescription, for example, or any other commodity, if I can go to Canada, Thailand, if I can go to South America, any country in South America, if I can go to Texas and I can find the same prescription for cheap, then I should be able to. If I can find somebody who's going to insure me with pre-existing conditions, I should be able to. The government should have never been.
But why should you have to go to Thailand to get the medicine that you need in the United States? I mean, it shouldn't have to cause you to go to the other side of the world to do that.
Well, the question is then why do I need to go to China? Why do I need to go to China to get my cell phone made? It's a free market. It is free trade. If I can go get something somewhere cheaper to support your way of life, to support your way of life, then I'm going to do it. If I'm in business of healthcare without any government support, the idea is to get as many customers, fortunately or unfortunately, right? If it's diabetes or high blood pressure, my thing is that how can I get this produced at the lowest cost possible to get it to people who are absolutely positively in need? What the government has done is that they've given the tax breaks and they've given subsidies to the damn healthcare systems. And then they told you, the customer who actually needs it, you don't get no damn breaks. You feel what I'm saying? That is cronyism at its finest.
I'm saying you're bringing up China.
It confuses me. Wait a minute. Okay, so let me jump in. We can talk about economic systems and how they function. We can also talk about free trade and how countries can specialize in certain things. Okay, so that's a whole different conversation. And I think the fact that you say that you lean libertarian, we'll find a lot of common ground in those spaces, because libertarians and people who tend to be extremely far left, like I tend to come to agreement with this whole renegotiation of these trade deals that Trump is doing. I definitely agree with that. I think that it's awesome. He got rid of TPP. I was all for it, right? But I mean, when you have conversations about specialization in other countries, okay, so let's just look at it like capitalism. I think we're going out of it. Adam Smith, the father of capitalism, said that there were certain things that government should take control of and not let the free market do. Education being one of them. He says that the government should be responsible for education because they recognize that if the government did not take control of those things, that only the elite will be highly educated. So in the whole basis of Adam Smith's,
I disagree with Adam.
Capitalism. Well, I mean, I think that's where you're giving this whole free market concept type thing from. Also, healthcare should never be something that somebody can profit off of. Because at the end of the day, as long as you are
Lord have
living
mercy.
and you are sick, somebody can make money off of you. And we should not be making money off of people being sick. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I mean, that's just human. Like, I mean,
Nobody
like,
makes money off of it.
we do in this country. You just talked about how they charge high prices for certain things.
No, I didn't get to finish. I didn't finish my. That's not where I was going. That's not where I was going. But I hear you, my brother.
You need government to step in and kind of regulate those things so that people can't profit off of people off inhumane things. And so that's what I'm saying. So because
I am so scared. When my black people say government, when my black people say we need government to do this and government to do that, I love y'all, but my damn body is literally like I'm sweating when every time I hear y'all say the government should do this. And I know that's crazy, but it's so beautiful because I'm learning from y'all, and I believe there are common grounds. I mean, I think there's some things that government needs to correct from things that they did in the past. But like when y'all say government, it's just, are we reading from the same history books? Like this is you can call them bad actors all you want to. Those bad actors, those grandkids still live. They're still in government. Black, brown, white, all of them. They're still there. And I just don't think there's anything greater than the individual. And the government it doesn't even have the capacity to, I mean, like the free market, the invisible hand. It's like there's so many things that makes the government not the go-to planned organization.
I think it's important to, and again, this could be the idealist side of me, but it's important to look at what is the type of world that we want to live in, right? Do we want to live in a world where your sister and brothers and your neighbors don't have to worry about having a roof over their head? Because I guess if they're your neighbors, hopefully they're in a house and they're not living on the street or in your backyard. Do they have access to fresh water? Do they have access to healthy food? Do they have access to healthcare so that way when something happens to them, they're going to be taken care of? Do they have access to education so that they can better themselves and put themselves in the market so that way if the market shifts in some way and we lose jobs in society in a certain industry, they can get educated and move to whatever industry to be productive members of society, which most people want to do, by the way, right? And so when we talk about a lot of these issues, we oftentimes look at the bad actors, the people that are taking advantage of the system, as opposed to how this is going to be benefiting the masses. And so I think it's just important for us to look at what is that vision of where we want to be. And I don't think any of us can disagree on the fact that we don't wish bad on anybody. So hopefully everybody has a house, has access to water, food, education, healthcare, right? I mean, there's some basic things that we hope everybody has access to. And I think the point that you're trying to get to, Jeff, is that the individual is responsible for their own success. So get there and good luck, right? And I think that the point that we're trying to make is there are systemic things that have caused this to happen disproportionately to certain groups of people more than others. And so how can we fix the system so that it doesn't just benefit white people or, just certain classes of people, and it works for everybody? So, and I guess part of what I'm saying too is maybe government isn't the complete answer. And I guess I'll submit a little bit to what your perspective is. I think that there's definitely a piece of this pie that is self-responsibility. Us as individuals have to play the game. We got to be part of this experience, right? So hopefully how I see people doing it is actively engaging in a political process, right? Like play a role in that and then allow people to better themselves and put themselves in a better experience so that we're all the better for it, right? If people, when they get sick, they get cancer, they don't have to endure the debt associated with that because it was unexpected. Now that's a drag on the entire system. I got to deal with that now. That's part of my problem because one of my fellow society members is struggling. So how can we lift us all up? Let's create that basic safety net for everybody in society. And then after that, we can figure out how do we kind of tweak things here and there or whatever. Gotcha. But yeah.
So socialism, or for a democratic socialism.
Hell yeah! You're talking to the wrong one. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
talking to the wrong girl,
so
man.
bad.
I'm talking to the wrong girl.
No. I mean,
I get it.
I think that, like you were saying, there were bad actors in government, and they have given advantages to certain people, and that has been written into law. And until the government actually goes in and changes that, but not only changes that, but gives people a leg up in the process. You have to understand that African Americans were slaves first, and then we came into the system, and they said, "Here, just go out there and figure it out your own damn selves." And so, but they didn't have any wealth or anything to stand on, so they were forced to still work for the slave owners because that was their only way of getting food or some sort of basic needs met, because they were just pushed out without any support or resources to get them started. They were supposed to get these 5 acres and a mule or 20 acres and a mule or whatever that was offered, but they never received that because during that time and during Reconstruction, after Lincoln died, his vice president came in and he didn't want none of that. And so, you have to understand that government has to step in. If they're going to give and just say, "Here, go ahead, do whatever you want to do," there needs to be some sort of a resource or support to help them get to that space. And I think, ultimately, our system may be a little bit flawed in the way that it functions as far as social services are concerned. But those supports help people. This is the reason why in the last Great Recession we had unemployment, we had food stamps, we had all these social services that we really didn't even feel the impact of it, even though it was worse than the first recession that we went through. So we need those resources, we need those supports. But the question is, how do you roll back some of those laws that you're talking about that came from those bad actors to make things better so that everybody can get that running start that they need to actually be individuals and be successful on their own?
Yeah, so so redistribution, some sort of redistribution is what you're saying, redistribution of wealth to kind of help people get up. I know I hear that narrative. I don't agree with it. I simply rest on the idea. I simply rest on the idea that if all of us, we got a healthcare worker, the brother in Monterey, we got brother Alex, left to our own devices. If I can go purchase some land and I don't have to pay tax on it every year, and if I don't pay tax on it every year, the government can come take it.
How am I going to purchase the land? I don't have no money. If the government says, okay, the government says it's okay, you can purchase land anywhere. Where am I going to get the income?
That's still there? We all still there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the thing is that the government is not into FHA loans. The government is not into VA loans. So then I go, as we used to do, I go to, say, an enterprising bank or a savings and loans, or I get 5 or 6 individuals and I purchase the land, use the land to farm my food and all of these other things. We have done it. We specifically, newly free slaves and his progeny, we have done it over and over and over again. My point is that when we saw, when the government, specifically the bad actors, began to give a leg up to white folks and sort of thing, and deny the same leg up to black folks, it's like, wait a minute, that's not part of this contract. So the government says, well, we'll do right by you. We'll give you, in 1968, my grandmother was 31, my mother was 2. We'll start giving you FHA loans and VA loans. What the government do? Well, we give you FHA VA loans, but you got to live over there in South Connellsville. We're going to artificially devalue your property, and it's going to be next to highways, and we're going to make sure that these properties, we're going to build a housing complex next to you. Well, shit, I want the same opportunities that you gave the rest of these people since 1930. It never happens that way. And what I'm suggesting is that how we said we're going to build, I keep using my local area, we're going to build the West End on our own. There are a few enterprising African Americans in this country that we're going to connect with, and we're going to build the West End on our own. We're going to have our own stores. We're going to have our own everything, and as much as possible. And if we absolutely positively need government for tax abatements, we absolutely positively need government to, well, like they do with other communities, then we'll do that. You know what I mean? But what we have done and I'm kind of borrowing from Malcolm, we have went and begged the government. And when the government has given it to us, and the government takes it away from us, it was theirs to take away in the first place. And we can call it a bad actor, we call it whatever we want to, but it has never worked for the Negro, ever. It has never worked. We haven't even given self-determination a try. Now that we've passed all this wonderful stuff, now we can vote, now we can get bused to communities and all of these other things. We haven't even given self-determination a try. We say, well, the government did us wrong. We need to do this. And I'm saying before we can even get to the utopian society that you all speak of, the democratic socialist society that you want to, I'm saying that at least give pure, I'm at least saying give pure capitalism a try. Us in government, let's limit government. Let's say government, you're overstepping your bounds. Let's come up with a fair way, because you said something earlier today. I have to give caveat here. You're right. Every state must have free education. It's written into our Constitution in 1803. Everybody is entitled to free education in Ohio, Kentucky, everywhere, right? And so let's figure out a way to fully fund education so everybody has the same opportunities. Outside of that, let's figure out the way we limit government and maximize freedom. That's all I'm saying.
Go ahead, Gerly.
So Jeff, I'm trying to be more open and listen to you. And so I hear what you're saying in a sense of, especially as a Black woman, I want to have generational wealth for my future, right? So I'm working hard, like 3 jobs, to make sure that I leave enough, right, for my family and my future family. The government has nothing to do with that, right? That's something I personally want. However, for my brothers, my sisters, my neighbors, if they are I come from a family who came from Haiti, right? Who decided to come to the US, better life, right? Work hard and do better for their kids. A lot of people didn't get that fair opportunity to have a better life like that, right? Like there was things in there that hurt them. I believe that the government should just step in and say, it doesn't matter that you came from Haiti. It doesn't matter that you live in a poor city versus another white person. I believe that you should have the same opportunity as everybody else. I'm not saying for me, right, that the government needs to step in for me. They don't have to, because I'm doing my own thing. But I'm just saying for everybody else, let's just have a fair playing field. Does that make sense? I get what you're saying about
I'm all for, yeah.
Jeff, I'll say this. You're a brave man for coming on here with these 3 Democrats.
I can't hear you, my friend.
I said,
Alex.
Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Is that better? Can y'all hear me?
I can't hear you.
I can hear you, and I can hear Jeff.
I can hear
Jeff,
both of you.
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes, yeah. I guess I responded and said I'm all for leveling the playing field. I'm all for that. I'm speaking of government, not in saying that there's no need for city government, state. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that when I'm using the term, which is kind of libertarian, classical liberalism-esque, right? What I'm saying is there's no need for government for things that we can do for ourselves. And what you described, right? When you talked about your family coming in from Haiti, shout out to brother Toussaint Louverture in the first free Black country, overthrowing the oppressor. What I'm suggesting still is that if the government today said that we're going to give $15,000 to every African in diaspora who's been affected by American chattel slavery, you know what I mean? What does that do for us? You know what I mean? What does it do for us? If when you correct one policy, right, and we get lawyers to figure out a way around the policy, what does it do for us? When we create something of our own, like a subsystem, there's not much that people can do against us. They can't take that away. I liken it to any other ethnic group in this country that has been able to carve out their own little small system. The Japanese, the Chinese, the Jews, you know what I mean? Everybody has been able to do that. Granted, they haven't had as many laws targeting their destruction. I get it. You know what I mean? As Dr. King said in his interview, the Negro skin color became stigma. I get that. But what I'm saying is that I noticed that, and I'm like, man, so in every system, they carved out their own little thing. They have their own community centers. They have their own doctors. They have their own lawyers. And when they absolutely positively need the system, or maybe the $15,000 in my hypothetical situation, then yes, we'll take that. But we're going to take it because the government can't come in based on their laws and take anything away from us. When we've tried to do that, it has been government that literally destroyed Black people and Black wealth. So I'm saying, like, how can we, let's get another Tulsa and let's try that. And then let's try to see if we can then use our economic power to influence political, I mean, as a stepping stone. You feel what I'm saying? As one step towards political freedom is what I'm trying to say. We are saying that we want government to bring us over across to Jordan. You feel what I'm saying? And the government has tried to do that over and over and over again. It was the Emancipation Proclamation. Go back and look at President Abraham Lincoln's reasoning for freeing the slaves. Had nothing to do with altruism. The idea was to send us to South America or send us over to Liberia, and even send us to Haiti. You know what I mean? It was no altruism. It was to get us out, and it was to get us away. It was very classist. And one of the key components of freeing the slaves is because on record they said that they're afraid that there's going to be a permanent degenerate group amongst the Anglo-Saxon race. And so, because there's no need to hire a white dude or a white woman, because the Negro, you know what I mean, are slaves, we can get people to do our work. These were very classic overtures that they made. And so, on one hand, I'm speaking about freedom for African Americans, but at the other hand, I'm speaking about an entire class that this country is built on keeping down, and policies, governmental policies continues to perpetuate that. So if I got to work 40 hours a week so I can afford healthcare, so I can afford a house, so I can afford all these other things, it's crazy. And in pure free market capitalist system, the cost of living should be going down. There's no way the cost of living should be going up, because we're more efficient. It doesn't take 14 days for us to get a letter from Massachusetts to California. It doesn't take long to get a correspondent. It doesn't take long to build a house. It doesn't take long to do gastric bypass surgery thanks to technology. So, but the cost of living is constantly going up and up and up. And the only people who are lacking the socioeconomic mobility, you guessed it, women, particularly of all colors, specifically the Black woman, you feel what I'm saying? And then the Blacks, and then any other racial minority, and then it's the class minorities. And we're saying we need the government to fix that. It's the government that created this thing, and I don't think that we have enough of folks, number one in our class, number one in our racial group, to turn this over. And so, yeah, Democrats, I just need to ask you, good if I'm in Haiti and it's the majority. I gotta ask you a question. It sounds scary to me when I look at us and we're only 13%, and I look at other racial minorities and gender minorities and sexually oriented sexual minorities, and said, no, I don't want to turn it over, because that's too much control. That's too much power that you give. And in addition to that, the police station.
Can you hear me, Jeff? Huh? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you.
But you can't hear Alex?
I cannot.
Oh, okay. You can't hear me at all still?
Yeah. So
yeah.
Or Alex, you tell me your question and I can ask him.
Here, let me do this. Can you hear me better? Is that better? No.
Jeff, can you hear Alex?
I cannot.
No.
Oh, shucks. That's crazy. I don't understand how you don't hear me.
What are you saying?
Okay.
Or why don't you text them in the private chat, Alex, on the right side?
Oh, yeah. There you go. So, hey, here, let me do this.
What is he saying?
You keep referring
to the conversation.
Yeah, I'm going to let you know, Jeff, when he says it. I'm waiting for him to say it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Capitalism, its extreme form, creates two classes. Yes, we become highly efficient.
Oh, this is a long question, Alex.
No, I'm just, let me ask him if he's really studied what capitalism is. What does capitalism in its extreme form really do?
So Jeff, he's asking.
Oh, he's pointing.
Yeah.
Because I think he may have that confused.
Right. I think that's the problem with Jeff. I think that's what I'm saying. I think he's understanding it like, I think he's on the same page with us, but it's in a different way. And that's what I think. But Jeff, he's asking, like, what does capitalism mean to you?
Or like, what does the version of capitalism really do? Yeah. Okay.
I see him saying
I think part of the question too is making, like, especially in the context of the most extreme form of capitalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you hear Tyler?
Yeah. So what is capitalism? And he said, what is in the most extreme form of capitalism?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah. So I admit that we're way too far, and because I don't know if this is recorded and is going to be shared publicly, but so I won't be as raw and real as I want to be. But I'll say that yes, I agree that we are way too far gone to now be saying, hey, let's just fully open up the floodgates and let's just go to free market capitalism, because I mean the gulf between the haves and the have-nots and the disparity, the income disparity is huge, right? I mean, to think that Jeff Bezos purchased $150 million home, you know what I mean? It's just like mind-blowing to me. You know what I mean? And so what capitalism means to me, or what the perfect capitalism means, it requires a qualifier. It requires free market, free enterprise, and respect of private property rights. I'll define it this way by saying what it is not. It is not bailouts to Wall Street. It is not tax subsidies. It is not tax breaks and telling working class people that they got to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. That bullshit. You feel what I'm saying? It's just bullshit. You feel what I'm saying? That is a perverted form where it's classism. I don't give it's classism. It is literally, if Chrysler in 1972 fails, Chrysler fails. If General Motors fails, General Motors fails. You feel what I'm saying? That I have the ability to negotiate my wage. I have the ability, of course you have the ability to unionize, of course. I have the ability to negotiate any commodity that I'm purchasing, including healthcare and gas prices and all of these other things, that we compete to get the prices as low as possible, because we're all trying to get the customers' dollars. So for example, the example I like to use is a beautiful example. If there are two pizza parlors, right? On a pizza parlor left and pizza parlor right. Pizza parlor left don't like black folks. They don't like LGBTQ folks. They got the best pizza in town. They sell their pizzas for $1. You feel what I'm saying? Pizza Hut, pizza place right folks, they love everybody. They accept everybody, they open accepting. They sell their pizzas for 75 cents. You see what I'm saying? I don't need government to come in and telling me that we're going to integrate pizza parlor left. I'm going to pizza parlor right, and the market, the capitalist free market system by design says that, number one, this pizza parlor they're bigots, their prices are high, they don't like racial minorities, they don't like sexual minorities. This pizza parlor is cheaper, their pizza is still the same, and they accept everybody. So what the market does, it literally punishes businesses for the bad mistakes that they make. So I know people don't like to hear it. So when you say, well, people should be making money off of folks who are sick, in capitalist system, it's a profit motive. And I'm okay with the profit motive, because it gives you something, it gives you innovation, it gives you something to adhere to, it gives you something to aspire to, right? And I'm saying this is in my utopian society. So if I know that I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I know the real disparities between, infant mortality with black women versus white women, an enterprising person in the capitalist system is going to go there, figure out what the median income is, or figure out what the price point is, and say, hey, I'm going to fix that because I can make millions of dollars. And it is not breaking the pockets of the women. It's not breaking the pockets of the families. It is literally a profit motive that compels me to help you. What we see in society today is, if I know the president, if I know the congressman, and I have money and I have great lawyers, I can get the IRS tax exemption. I can get this written into laws. At one point in time, I can get pork. That is cronyism. Crony capitalism is literally racism. It is literally racism. It is the personification of racism. And I can say this very publicly: we're never going to be able to break that system. So as hopeful as we are that more people are going to vote, that more people, good actors, are going to get into the government, we are too far gone, centuries now, too far gone. Thanks to Woodrow Wilson, by the way, Democrat. I feel a little jab in there, but you know, we are way too far gone for us to even consider finding the answers through government action. The answer literally is there's a landlord named Council woman Gerly, and she has this house over here, and she's been able to get this house on market $600. The market price, the market leader has his or her property on the market for $800. I'm going to Gerly. Now, Gerly, how would you able to do that? Well, I found this specialized wood. I found this specialized toilet. I found this specialized whatever. Oh, we need to go to Gerly Enterprises. Now, Gerly's going to be able to duplicate that throughout the Western name. The government can't do that because the first thing that the government do is, number one, is bureaucracy. And I'll end with this. Using the market capitalist system, free market, free enterprise capitalist system, and free trade, somehow the home values go up. But it is made with materials that literally, what is the word I'm looking for? I'm having a brain freeze. Materials that literally rot, like the wood in your house and the bricks. Like, if anything, housing and healthcare and everything should be falling. In this country, everything rises, and we accept the 2% inflation. You know what I'm saying? And of course, I'm talking about the feds. It is demonstrably worse for Black folks in particular, and working class and poor people in general. And the idea is to give that same government more power to solve an issue that they created since 1919. I can't understand it. I can't stand. Look like he's talking.
Yeah.
Look like he's talking.
We are about to hit.
Is he talking?
Hour mark. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can't hear.
Yeah.
I honestly can't
so
hear.
I think he's gonna end it, but he's gonna just
yeah. You guys, I'll say this.
I wish I could hear him. I'm so sorry.
We're gonna have to have this conversation again.
What did he say?
Good.
He's saying that we have to have this conversation again.
Yeah.
It's gonna cost you next time as a free market capitalism. You're gonna have to pay it.
But Jeff, I wonder if you learned something from like all of us in our thinking. I feel like with you, like I already texted my husband. I said, "Oh my God, I gotta get my books up. Like you know history, like you can quote stuff. Like that's amazing." So you know.
Thank you so much, Alex. Could you tell Alex and Council Member Williamson that I so appreciate this opportunity, and I at the end of the day, we are all humans, right?
Do this.
The qualifiers that we have, the whatever you want to call yourself, for humans, and I believe that the reason why America is great is because we all need to work together. And I hope that I'm gonna get off this phone and I'm gonna try to find you all on social media, because you may have, my best friend is Nicholas O'Rourke, right? He started off as an organizer. He ran for the Working Families Party. But I learned so much from him as a super liberal, a far left liberal, that it actually helps me understand how it helps me moderate my positions, because I'm not always right. You feel what I'm saying? I'm living in the idealistic, world myself. You know what I mean? And so anytime that we can exchange ideas is helpful, because, I want to use what's working for you in Monterey and what's working for you in Massachusetts here in Cincinnati, if possible.
So can you tell him to shout out how people can contact him? So
Jeff, how can people contact you? Like, shout it out.
Oh, so I'm at Vote Pastor on Twitter. That's a great way to contact me. Let me see, make sure I get my handles right here. At Vote Pastor on Twitter. On Facebook, I believe in freedom of speech. So, sometimes it gets a little, as we call it, live on Facebook. So that's Jeff Pastor. So you got me at Vote Pastor on Twitter, and then you can find me on Facebook at Jeff Pastor.
Okay. Gerly, how do you contact you?
Yeah, not on Twitter yet, but my Instagram is at Gerly Adrien, or my Facebook is at Gerly Adrien as well.
Okay. And Tyler?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing that people have to keep in mind is my name has 2 L's in it. So it's Tyller. So for Instagram, you can find me at Tyler Williamson. For Twitter, it's Tyler4, the number 4, Monterey. And then my Facebook is Monterey City Council Member Tyler Williamson. Just type Tyler Williamson, you should find me. With 2 L's, Tyler with 2 L's. And it's the right way to spell Tyler, by the way.
All right. So I'm going to take you guys off.
Tyler with 2 L's.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Hey, Alex, thank you too, by the way, for having us on. I really appreciated this dialogue, and we need to do more of this. It feels good to talk to Black people.
Yes. And please donate to their campaign.
Here we go.
All right.
Thank you. I guess you all had it.
So much for doing this for me. Like, I don't think you understand how much it means to me that you guys will take the time out of your night to talk about this with me, because you guys could be doing so many other things, and so I really, really do appreciate you guys. I just want to let you guys know that. All right, we're definitely going to have you back on the show. We'll talk about other stuff. Yeah, and I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive at trying to get it so I can get a flyer out there so you guys can be seen. But it was just kind of finagling everybody around, and I'm still in school, so this is like it was a lot. But yeah, we're going to do this again, all right? So I'm going to take you guys off. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Say my closing thoughts about this whole thing. And I love you guys. Thanks.
It was a pleasure meeting you.
Hear nothing he said.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
All right. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to us. This show actually lasted a little longer than I thought it was going to. It was only only supposed to be an hour long, and it ended up being for 2 almost. Jeez. But it was a really good conversation to hear the different perspectives of the Republican side and the Democratic side, and then just hearing the different perspectives from the different sides of the country, and then how the conversation went. So I'm definitely going to have them back on the show. I mean, it's Jeff Pastor, Tyler Williamson, Gerly Adrien again. They're all city council members in their respective cities. Please check them out. Donate to their campaigns. They're all millennial legislators. They're really doing big things in their cities and really trying to make change and help people. I just want to put out there that we are in a very, very interesting time in our country. I am kind of excited that, a lot of these changes are being made. A lot of people are really thinking about racism, about economics, and like really how to move our country forward, specifically for communities that have been marginalized historically. I know you kind of heard a little bit of that history as we were kind of talking about it a little bit before. Check me out. Shoot me an email. You can email me at jay8390@gmail.com. You can hit me up on my social media. I'm Alex Deering on Facebook. I am j.alex.deering on Instagram. You can check me out on that page. My YouTube channel is J8390. You can check us out on there. You can send me a message there too. But yeah, check out our conversations. I think that I'm going to try to do something cool next week. I'm still trying to mold some ideas around in my head. So they kind of just come to me along the week, and then I'm just like, okay, I need to talk about this, and then let me try to find some friends. So if you have any suggestions on topics, please feel free to shoot them in the comment sections or hit me up, send me an email. If you have questions or if you want somebody to come back on the show, shoot me an email, let me know. I can bring them back. We can have larger conversations. I just want to really engage and interact with you guys and kind of develop this a little bit, because I think it's been good. It's given me a chance to keep up with my friends. I haven't talked to in a while. I have a lot of friends. Life is crazy and busy. You don't really get to catch up with them. But this is giving me the opportunity to do this. So do feel free to hit me up and let me know what you think. And whether it be positive, criticisms, I take those too. All right. Thank you so much for paying attention to me. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us for 2 hours. I really appreciate it. Share, like, comment, and I'll see you next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m.